You're not OCD. You just have moments of OCD.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think people that suffer with OCD want everything to be perfect all the time. And that's kind of one of the problems. And it ends up with, like these superstitious kind of things that you have to do, like where you have to move things like a million times, and life becomes 50% harder because even leaving your house or tying your shoelaces, you have to do until you kind of feel like it's kind of good luck for you.
It's one little different way of looking at things is to allow things to go wrong. And to allow things not to work out perfectly. And if you first can accept the mistakes of life, mistakes are the most important part of life. Again, when you've probably heard that simile of the 70% rule. So when I was a school teacher for 1 year, and I had to ask some help, how do we set exams for kids? And they gave me the answer that don't set them too hard. Otherwise, the kids won't like the subject. If you set it too easy, it's useless. But try and get an average score of 70%, which means 70% in a maths exam. That's pretty good. And the 30% where you make mistakes, that's really important for me, the teacher. I've discovered parts of the course which I thought they understood, but they hadn't. So the 30% was where we grow, we learn, and improve. If we didn't have those mistakes, there'd be no learning, no growing. So that's why we don't expect life to be perfect. We don't expect other people to be perfect. We don't expect ourselves to be perfect. And all the parts where we make mistakes, that's where we learn and grow from. It's also where people make mistakes, that's what's really funny. You tell other people about all your mistakes and stupid things you do. The last time I did a Zoom talk, it was to someone in England. Just the place I was doing it, right behind me was the toilet door. The toilet door was open. So my backdrop was my loo.
I'm sure worse things have happened.
When they do, you laugh at it. You don't sort of get embarrassed. Sometimes people get just so aroused because they demand results. They demand things to go this way. And that's sort of that force, that harshness on life rather than the softness of life.
Yeah.
That's actually where the OCD comes from. And the softness of life, the kindness and the love of life. Not asking other people to be special, not asking sort of anything to be different. They get cold weather, warm weather. Politicians do this, other people do that. That's our life.
Yeah.
So it's a much more acceptance instead of fighting life. Again, just working with life. And forgiveness, acceptance, without trying to prove anything to yourself. It's a marvelous way of weakening the power which propels those obsessive thoughts.
I kind of worry that with OCD, whether the letting go kind of gets mixed up with control a bit, and that people kind of use meditation to control their day rather than let go of differences.
Exactly. And so if you listen carefully, the letting go just has to be not doing letting go, but letting go of doing. And another thing about learning how to let go is, most people know these days that it's by measuring we get control. This was something which the scientist Lord Kelvin found couple hundred years ago, start of the Industrial Revolution. And he said, if we want to control nature, we have to learn how to measure it accurately, first of all. That's why I've got these standard lengths and measures and weights and time. And the opposite to that is if you don't measure, you can't control anything. It's one of the reasons why, whether it's Google or Zoom or whatever, they love measuring all sorts of data from us. They're thinking the more we measure, the more we can control. But I'd always like that. If you don't measure anybody, you can't control them. You don't measure yourself or measure your mind. Yeah, it's one way of letting it go. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it in between? If you don't measure, then no control is possible, which is a wonderful way of letting go. So you don't measure yourself. You don't measure your relationships, your partners, your parents, or whatever. Mum and dad is just mum and dad. You are just you. You don't measure at all, which means you can just enjoy them. And if you don't measure, they sometimes show you some amazing things which you never expected. And that's what your brain does. If you measure it, say you've got OCD, then it will not be free to show you other parts of itself.
Okay.
And that's the other part of OCD and other types of emotional differences which people have is I went to Singapore some years ago for a conference on mental health. And after my presentation, this guy took me aside and said he was the head professor of schizophrenia in Singapore. And I asked him how he treated schizophrenia in Singapore. And he said, just like you've been teaching us, I don't treat schizophrenia. I treat the other half of the patient, just not schizophrenic.
You focus on the good side and then...
Yeah, the side which is not OCD.
Yeah.
Because that's not all of you. That's just a part. Times of the day, times of the year, times of your life. You have the symptoms of OCD. It doesn't make you an OCD person. There's more to you than that. Yeah. Focusing on the other part is where you have enormous benefits. I asked him, well, what's the results in Singapore? Because have governments looking over you, making sure everything is going well. He said, far, far better than usual practice. Being kind to, it's just OCD. Other people have it as well. But just when you not afraid of it, not stigmatize it, it doesn't get so strong. It gets very weak and weak and weaker. So it's hardly there.
I think the problem with OCD as well is that a lot of people try and force it to go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of the key, I think, as you say, to try and work with it and let it kind of happen.
Yeah.
With the subject of control, when you meditate and you meditate to kind of obviously enjoy your day and let go, is there like a positive kind of control? Because when I meditate, I do feel like my life is kind of in control, but at the same time, I feel like I'm loose and have let go at the same time. So there's a bit of a paradox.
It's not really controlling because there's still many, many things happen you didn't sort of expect.
Yeah.
That's one of the nice things about letting go. You can open up to the unexpected and see things you never expected to see before. But you think it's in control because you don't need to adjust anything. Life is going quite smoothly. So it gives you the idea you're in control of the car when everything is going like in cruise control. It's just going perfectly.
Yeah.
So be satisfied with how deep you've gone and how peaceful you are. When you don't want anything else, that's when you get deeper. when you don't want it, when you're relaxing.
Yeah.
And that's a great message of life. Sometimes we want to control it, we want to own it, we want to make it sort of ours, so it's always going to be there. That's when we destroy it. I don't know how many relationships you've been through, but sometimes your partner feels you're controlling them. And if that happens, it just all breaks up. And it becomes part of life that when we have some happiness and goodness in our life, we have to just let it be and not try and be afraid if it's going to disappear from us. Because if you're afraid it's going to disappear, then it's sure to disappear.
That's one of the main things that I've noticed is that when things are going really well, that's when OCD is the worst.
Yeah.
And I guess you're just trying to maintain that kind of good streak of luck that you're going through.
Yeah, so don't try and maintain it, just let it go. The more luck will come by itself, yeah. The more you let it go, the more you relax, the more healthy you are. And one of the nice things to be able to remember is when you do some letting go, do it with kindness. We're not expecting any results, just giving the plant a time to grow. And so it's always the mindfulness and the kindness together, which I found the most effective with things like an OCD.
Yeah.
So if it comes back again, welcome it. Thank you for coming. You've heard me say before about the monster in the Emperor's Palace.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most beautiful similes. Just be kind to your OCD. In other words, don't try and beat it up because otherwise it'll come back harder at you. And after a while, with that kindness, it allows you to actually understand it and be with it. And it gets weaker and weaker until the time comes it's not really a problem. It's still there, but it never is a problem anymore.
You know how powerful superstitions can be. It's to do with, religion. And sometimes with OCD, people do have these religious thoughts, which are almost the most powerful ones because you can't really get through them. Is there any methods that you've got to try and loosen the grip of superstition?
It's just Well, what you can do, people who really like superstition, replace a bad superstition with a good superstition. In other words, just something which is nice and kind. Like even last night, at my talk I gave here, I was telling people that it's so hard being a Buddhist monk these days because you're a religious person. You can't go and hug people because you get accused of sexual harassment, and you can't hug a person because there's so many diseases around, like COVID. So I said it's really hard, to be a religious leader. You can't hug anybody, and you can't get a hug yourself. So I said the way to overcome that is actually to self-hug. When my mum was a gave myself a good hug and got everyone in the room to do the same. So that's like a funny, useful but good. You can feel some kindness and compassion coming up there. That's something positive you can replace negative things by. Even like some superstitions. I don't know what the superstition might be. You want to put things in a certain place. For example, just Buddhists, sometimes they think the Buddha has to be in a certain place. And when we first came to Australia, we put the Buddha statue facing the wrong way in our main hall, big one.
Yeah.
And so because of that many people, traditional Buddhists, complain these Western monks don't know what they're doing. But we had a visiting Thai monk at the time, and he said, "Oh, don't worry. If the Buddha didn't like facing that way, it's big metal Buddha statue, he would have turned around himself." It's obviously saying something. Superstitious people realizing, well, you can take that further. The Buddha could move around himself. Big, solid, massive statue couldn't do that at all. But that was just using one superstition to actually overcome others. All the best.